Okay, I've hit it.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Ryan Leach, and welcome to the LiveTalks Take 3, part of MaMa's new online gatherings, online happenings for new digital content. The Live Talks you can watch on Facebook Live, or you can watch on our website at lamama.org/livetalks3. And today we have a really important conversation called Our Desire to Assemble. We have a very exciting panel where we're going to talk about how artists are making performance during the global quarantine, the importance of gathering in a space to witness performance, and the benefits and limitations of live streaming performances and more. My name is Ryan Leach. I am the social media and marketing outreach associate for La Mama. And today we'll have Noel Allain. He's the founding artistic director of the Bushwick Starr Theater. We're also excited to have Billy Clark, who is the founding artistic director of CultureHub, which Lama loves very much. We have Abby Marcus, who is the managing director for the Orchard Project and also teaches at CalArts. She's coming to us from the West Coast today. We have Nicky Paraiso, who is a performer, a singer, musician, writer, curator, and performance artist at La Mama, who curates La Mama Moves every year, one of my favorite programs. And we have Ivan Talijancic, who is from the Wax Factory. He's the co-founder of the Wax Factory and a New York-based international multidisciplinary art group. So we're so excited to have all of you here today. I just wanted to say, this conversation is happening in the context of global quarantine, and every day in the news there's a lot of very sad things. So we feel very privileged to be able to gather here today to have this conversation as artists. And I'd like to welcome you all. Just to start off, I'd actually like to start with Nicky. If you'd like to go, let's just take a time. I just wanted to ask, what are you feeling? And I wanted to get a sense from everyone while you're all sort of in quarantine and solitude in this sort of existential experience. What kinds of conversations are you having with your friends and collaborators in the face of this quarantine and pandemic? And what are you talking about? What obstacles are you finding as you continue to think about creating performance? Nicky?
Well, hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I've been thinking a lot about the relationship and the connection between performer and audience. And the fact that we have been live streaming in the past 4 weeks, which is not a very long time, actually, and to an unseen audience. I wanted to touch on two issues, maybe to start us all off quickly. And I was thinking of how storytelling has always been an essential part of a community, whether it be the men and women of long gone times sitting around a campfire telling each other stories, and which were then disseminated through the community that was seated around the campfire. And then we have the Greeks in their 3,000 or however thousand seated amphitheaters. And there were probably apparently only 1, 2, 3 actors performing in front of thousands of people. So that's one, the storytelling aspect and the relationship of storyteller to audience is one thing. And then Ryan, you already touched on the second thing I was thinking about, which is this, what I'd like to call the existential dilemma, and that most of us sitting in these rooms together at this moment are kind of hybrids. We are all curators, producers, organizers, dramaturgs, but we also wear the hat of artists. I think most of the people assembled here today would say that, would agree with, would concur with that. And so as for myself, I really feel this existential dilemma strongly of how I feel as a curator, how I feel as an organizer. Yes, we have to keep moving the institution forward, or the venue forward, or the community forward. And as an artist, who is also a performer, I have this desire to disseminate information to an audience, whether they are seen or not. But then in my solitude and in my isolation within my apartment, I feel the need to reflect and take time off. So I'm not, none of this is either right or wrong. These are all just feelings conjured up by this uncertain time that we're living in. So that's how I want, well, that's a lot, but that's what I wanted to throw out to my fellow panelists this evening. So I'll stop for now.
Yeah, thank you for starting us off, Nicky. And everyone else, feel welcome to respond to that and sort of what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what kind of conversations you're having.
That's a lot to unpack. I think I think what I'm personally feeling is this like mounting sense of grief, this emptiness of what we lose when we commune together, and I think what that has led me to investigate in the current moment is what is this need for liveness in the arts, both the live and visceral experience we have artist to artist collaborating, and that communal experience we have artist to audience, and then also that experience that we have as audience in a live setting with work. And I know a lot of the conversations that are bubbling up among the artists that we've supported over the years in the Orchard Project, our alumni artists and our community, has been a lot about if this is the new norm, if digital is our new norm for a while, what is liveness in this setting? How what are the innovations that move beyond the unidirectional streaming platforms to make a more multi-directional experience between artist and an audience, or between artist and artist as collaborators. So that's kind of a little bit of what has been spinning around in my head as I try and think about, if we are sitting in this environment for a while, which it feels like we could possibly be, what are the paths forward so that we're not feeling stagnant.
I'll just jump in and say, I think about performance, or the act of gathering for a performance, and that event of all these people gathering in one room to watch this performance unfold and take in the information. It's an intellectual experience, it's an emotional experience, and it's a meditative experience. You feel all these other entities with you, kind of experiences at the same time. You're noticing everyone's different reactions. It's so multifaceted, but it's also, when I say meditative, I think very much of like that kind of gathering. I think I'm not, I don't go to church, but when I go to a performance, I think of it in the same way that I think many people think of like how church functions in their lives, in terms of like a communal place, a place to meditate, a place to like gather with other people and feel that kind of community. I think it's a really good question, and I don't have an answer for how that is achieved, or if it can be achieved through a digital media. But I just came to participate in this from these kind of working groups that Agnes Berinsky has been hosting, where she is really leading like a group of people through different thought exercises and discussions and writing exercises and meditation exercises through Zoom. And even though it's not the same as all being together in a room, it's a kind of, she's managed to create a very meditative place, a thoughtful place, and something that does, create some modicum of that experience that I treasure in being in a room, physically with other people. So I think that there's something there about the way that we're engaging each other through these kinds of platforms that allows people to still like share ideas and share experiences in a very like immediate way. This is live, even though we're not sharing space. And I don't think there's any way I'll ever not miss, sharing space. But we also are dealing with, a unprecedented experience that we have to wrestle with and find ways to innovate and reach for those things still.
Great. I wanted to also open up anyone who is watching. You can feel free to comment in the Facebook comments below to ask any questions of any of the panelists, and I'll be happy to ask them for you. Pivoting a little bit, talking about sort of why it is still important to gather, I wanted to ask you, Billy, of CultureHub. I know CultureHub has developed LiveLab as a digital technology that was originally used to connect audience and performers across space before the quarantine. But can you talk a little bit about how you used LiveLab before the quarantine, how you've been using it since that started, and just sort of what are the artistic considerations of starting to live stream and broadcast performance?
Sure. I mean, maybe just to contextualize, CultureHub was born out of this almost 30+ year relationship between La Mama and the Seoul Institute of the Arts, and the initial seed idea about what what CultureHub might be, even before it was CultureHub, was would it be possible to use the internet and video conferencing tools to create a window between these two institutions that had this deep relationship. And it was always a very progressive, so we're 10 years old. This is our 10th year. And so we started this thinking right from the beginning. That was the seed idea was, La MaMa and the Seoul Institute of the Arts, they had developed this very large international network. And we were wondering, it was a question if how could the internet and how could these technologies actually supplement and reinforce and maybe find new avenues for connection and sustained collaboration. Even though many of La MaMa's collaborators are geographically isolated from one another. And what we ran into were just a series of huge problems. Things like the tools we were working with were too costly. They weren't accessible. They were designed for other industries. They were inflexible. They took too much energy and knowledge to implement. And so basically the whole idea of having more access, we found was, it wasn't didn't just come easily. And about 5 years ago, as a progression of this struggle, we decided that we wanted, is it possible to make something that's our own tool? And our then technical director, Jesse Ricky, sort of had this idea because there had been a lot of code that had been open sourced, and maybe we could build something that we could customize. And then we started engaging some creative coders to do a feasibility study, and then eventually got a prototype, and then we got a little bit of funding, and slowly over that time we created this tool called Live Lab. And I think the idea really was just to make it easier, to do some of the things that we wanted to do in our creative practice, and we were focused mostly on bringing venues together. So the big idea for us was that well, now in the time of the internet, isn't it feasible to think that a theatrical venue or performing arts venue could just open up a wall and they're connected with another venue, and now these are sort of modular and they can interconnect and in a variety of different ways. And the whole point of that would be that we could bring communities together, I think, which is what is the really, really cool thing. So yeah, artists can travel and companies can travel and they can have these experiences. But this idea of bringing two physical spaces together and bringing communities together, audiences together for a shared experience that's hybrid, partially physical, partially digital, was largely our main focus.
Can you give me an example of like one of the instances that you used it for that purpose?
Yeah, one of the early things we started doing was improvisation, because liveness became ever more important. So improvisation became interesting to us. So we started a project called Digital Duets, which was initially initiated. It was sort of born out of project by Dawn Crandall and her partner Baba Israel, who had become the artistic director of a theater in Manchester called Contact Theater. And they were New Yorkers originally, and they still are, but they had an improvisatory dance event that they would host monthly that would bring dancers from different backgrounds of dance together to perform with musicians. And Baba reached out and said, hey, could we do this digitally? Could we connect back with this community that we care about in New York and create this digital exchange? And some of the preliminary ones that left a lot to be desired, but over time, over several years of development, we started projecting onto scrims, and we really created the semblance of a shared sort of space and stage that inhabited a physical environment that was pretty dynamic and fun to watch.
Amazing. Again, if anyone is watching this on Facebook Live, feel free to ask any questions in the comments, and I'll be happy to ask our panelists. Going forward, I know that a lot of us who are artists in New York City have been seeing a lot of content that's being live streamed, whether it's on Instagram Live, if it's on Twitch, if it's on Facebook Live, a lot of different places, also things that have been pre-recorded that are being live streamed that were actually performed in theatrical venues. I'm wondering if anyone who's working right now, do you have concerns about, the obstacles you're facing adapting to this new format? And do you think that anything is lost in this new medium, since the medium of theater seems to kind of rely upon gathering together? And anyone can talk.
Maybe I'll just jump in to keep the ball up in the air. I suppose it's we can let the cat out and share with our audience that we had a little brainstorming session yesterday where we tossed some of these ideas around. And I will just say, these are just my personal thoughts. I have no judgment about different ways in which fellow artists have chosen to engage or alternatives that folks have been looking for in terms of sharing, theatrical content. I feel like I don't really have answers. I have a lot of questions. I feel like for us, as a producing company for Wax Factory, and also I should say, which has been said already, this situation may feel like we've been it for a long time, but it's actually just been for about a month, which is not a hell of a long time. So I think there is still a lot of discovery. I think there is a lot of reflection. Again, just going back to us, I feel like we as a producing company haven't, at least yet, felt the urge to sort of rush and put the content online. I think some of my reservations about that have to do with what some of my fellow panelists have said already. Which is, the question for me is like, is it better for us to really take the time to discover a way of putting content online that feels somehow authentic to that particular form? Because there is, otherwise I'm concerned that we may be sort of like rushing to jam the content that really is not specific to that particular medium into another medium, and then a lot of that gets lost. I mean, we have been talking a lot about the experience of watching something live and what is so unique about the performing arts. As I recall, there have even been studies made that when you are in a theater with an audience, your heartbeat syncs up. There's like something really irreplaceable, I think, about that experience. And so again, for me, it's really just like an open question as to whether we really need to rush to sort of pack all of that into a medium that it's not necessarily been designed for. Like, what is lost when instead of seeing an actual sculpture, you're watching it on a flat screen? I mean, it's not the same thing. So I think it's really important for us to keep in mind what is authentic to that particular form. And I think it's also important for us to think about, as theater artists, what may be different ways of expressing ourselves that is somehow in sync with the digital form.
Yeah, would anyone else like to comment? You know, I've heard criticisms of why we're theater artists making work right now. Shouldn't you leave it to, you know, TikTok performers, to Netflix, which is made for streaming? Anyone would like to comment?
I mean, I think to what's being said right now, there is these capturing of the shows that were canceled, and this streaming of archival of things that were documented when they were on the stage. And I think that is a very different streaming experience than presenting a play when we're all sitting in front of webcams as actors and performers and devisers and creators and artists, creating a piece where we lose the theatricality of it, or the theatricality of it is forced into a different medium. And I mean, I hate to use this as an example, but I don't know if anyone watched the live Saturday Night Live that happened, but like even that has an emptiness to it. And they were trying real hard to make those pieces specific to the format that they were inside of, right? Inhabiting the Zoom, the webcams, the iPhones, and even those feel strangely empty. And that's not to say that art shouldn't exist in that space, but I do think you know, there is this level of like, how do we work in this medium that it separates out what is going to be coming out in the next month or two, when we don't have the streaming of the archival stuff to sit back on anymore, the shows that were closed. So,
and I wanted to say, kind of going off of that, Abby, have any of you contemplated like what the role of a theater or an arts organization is, and going forward, do you think that that's going to change the way you think about it?
I just want to, well, in answer to your question, Ryan, not at base level, I don't think, because in considering the question Abby and Yvonne were just talking about, like the question to me, I'm torn a bit, because there's the response to the necessities of the situation, and the question of like, how do I, you know, if this is a long period of time, like how does one continue to operate, you know? But I think like in part of me is like, you know, when we make work that's supposed to be experienced live in a room with a bunch of people, there's a language that we are fairly familiar with, and that each individual performing artist is manipulating in their own way, that is specific to that environment. And when we think about making work in this kind of environment, there's a different language. It's not the same. And so part of me is like, if we're going to be sitting in this for a while, our job is to figure out what that language is exactly, and how we make work for this environment. And so I don't think that as like an arts organization, our job changes, because that to me should always be artist, or, you know, all the work we do is artist led, and this should be artist led, because I'm going to look to artists that we work with and whose work we believe in to be exploring that realm and saying, oh, hey, I had this idea about how I can create something special in this environment, or a way of reaching people in this environment. Let's try that. And our job is to then help support them do that. So in that sense, I don't think our mission changes.
yeah, 100% to that. I think being responsive to what this new form looks like is 100% where we are as an organization. I mean, the Orchard Project is not a traditional producing organization. We are an accelerator. And so much of what we do for projects is in the early nascent development stages, providing what traditionally we do is provide time and space during a 6-week period in Saratoga upstate New York, where artists can get away from daily life and immerse in the process of creating their work in a community with others creating their work. So there may be some real challenges to doing that this summer. Specifically that we might not be able to convene as a large group. And I think that we as an organization are putting a lot of thought as a staff, we as a board, as a group of working artists, which is what entirely our staff is created by, and also with our alumni artists and advisory council about what can still serve that communal purpose of coming together, and that need to create work. I mean, often work that's created in a devised and ensemble setting, not only just the work of a single artist or a single creator or a single generator. So how is that continually supported moving forward through this summer and into the fall?
I also wanted to sort of ask, what kind of work are all of you looking for? Like, what do you think on these mediums in this context is going to best heal and inspire and sort of educate people during the quarantine? And
well,
anyone?
I'd just like to address that. Thank you, Ryan. What I think is working, I thought I was going to be the negative person on this, but now I'm talking about positive things. I think what is working is the immediacy. And as I look around, oh, there's a kitty. As I look around at all these spaces, I think that rectangular form or that square form is very conducive to the immediate presence of a performer or even an object, a puppet, contained within this frame. And because I'm quite familiar with the cabaret form, what has been working are, as we have been doing in Cafe La Mama and Downtown Variety, thank you CultureHub, that immediacy is what, of seeing a performer work something out in front of you, even if you cannot immediately interact with them on a live level, is something of value, I think. What I'm not sure about are the forms that seem to be churning or gestating under the guise of this format. I mean, I don't think I can take more living room dance or kitchen dance. I think that goes a long way. And I don't think it goes further. I really don't. So that's the grappling with the form and the format.
I love that. I wanted to turn really quickly to the comments really fast. We have one observation from Carmen Campos, and she said, "Nothing replaces live in-person experiences, but in seeing these many performances on social media, I'm a bigger fan of more performers." And we have a question from Joyce Isabel, which says, what do you think is gained by the medium? And I kind of wanted to turn to Billy and ask you, since you have a lot of experience working in Live Lab, both in physical spaces, but now live streaming without physical spaces, what are the considerations and kind of possibilities of a digital screen in these performances?
Well, I think that we all have to really consider what we mean by this medium. And right now, this medium is seeming like Zoom. And I think that it shouldn't be limited to that. And I think that this goes back to this idea of why not just let Netflix handle this. And the reason is Netflix is a distraction. It's a welcome distraction often, but it's not the same as Cafe La Mama was for me the other night, which was an emotional experience of actually shedding light on the community that is I'm deeply, most deeply connected to. And, I learned things about people that I see, on a regular basis, and other facets of what they do and who they are that I might have never learned if it weren't for this circumstance. And so I do think that, I'm very much in agreement that we need to reflect, and that this is a time of reflection. But I also think that we are in a moment that we don't fully understand, that is something that will get looked back upon. When La Mama really, why was that time of La Mama's birth so vibrant, creatively? And it was because the struggle was so deep and so hard. And I think that this is, there are many, many things that we're thinking about, but in some ways, this is unique to all of them because it's such a global issue, and it's shedding this light that we are so interconnected, right? And so we're going to leave these traces because everything we're doing is mediated, right? And people are going to look back, and they're going to say, did they do the right thing? And there's not a singular answer, but I think the collective tapestry of how different people are approaching this and the artifacts that will be left behind is going to be very, very interesting. And I hope that it can propel us into something that's really new. And that, related to the medium, I think, is that, what I see, because I come from the performing arts and experimental theater and dance background. So I'm really, very invested in liveness, and I'm interested in that. I'm interested in bringing people together. But we invested, like, for the first 5 years of CultureHub into building relationships in the new media space and the technology space, because we realized we didn't have those, we had the lineage of La Mama's history. So we had relationships in the performing arts, but we didn't have so much and we wanted CultureHub to be a space where the performing arts and new media communities could intersect. What I see there that's really exciting is that there's an embracing, it's like the internet is the venue, like and not every piece of new media art involves the internet, but the internet can become the venue in many, many different ways. And I think that trying to unpack those and try to collaborate with people that have different skill sets, like there's a whole thing emerging about social VR, and and Facebook is leading this charge. And quite honestly, it's terrifying. I went into some social VR. There's a thing called VR chat, and I ended up in there with a bunch of middle school kids that were playing, shooter games. And I left, feeling just a little bit horrified, about what is happening. And at the same time, we're working with two groups of artists that are revamping those, telling stories, trying to find narratives, looking at mythology. I just spoke with an artist today in the La Mama meetups who wanted to look at Korean shamanism and how that relates to avatars. I think that we as artists have a responsibility, and not every artist, because I strongly believe that theater and the performing arts will continue to exist in real places, and as it should, and will always, my heart will always beat for that and want to be a part of that. But we can do more in this online space than we are doing, and it's going to take the innovation of many, many people. And maybe this is a moment where many people that weren't focusing on it now might put a little bit more focus on it, and because of that collective focus, that perhaps there could be a positive shift.
Billy, that's really beautiful, the context that you put that in, sort of like a call to action. I wanted to go ahead and return to the comments again, because people are really being inspired by the stuff that's being said. And one of the comments is from Ralph Lewis. He says, theater and sports industries share a need for live audiences. Sports leagues are already planning their future, players, but no audience. And I wonder if the theater biz will learn anything from them. They already have cameras on wires like Julie Taymor's Spider-Man. Do we need electronovision? And then he has like a link to a Wikipedia article if anybody wants to check that out. And also from Alice Canton, she's sort of posing this question to the panelists, and we can move forward with responding to any of this, but she says, are we romanticizing the notion of the live performance when there are still ongoing issues beyond the current situation around climate change and artists in exile that prohibit travel and in-person connection? Just going off of those two comments, I wonder, are any of the panelists inspired to sort of respond to those? It's open.
Oh, I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Becky.
I'm sorry, Abby.
No, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you for that comment. I think, which is somewhere I wanted to go, which is actually not directly connected to theater and performance, but what is going on in this time in the world, in the universe. So I've been thinking a lot about how the earth and how the universe is saying, stop, humanity, take a look at yourselves. And it's apparently, the migration of birds is doing something a little bit different. Apparently, you can see the tops of the Himalayas. You can the air is clearing up. Maybe, perhaps this may be fake news, but the canals of Venice are clearing up, and the fish are returning. But so the earth is actually taking care of itself, while we've foisted this destruction on the world for centuries. And here's the world saying, at least this is one viewpoint of it that I've been thinking about. Here's the universe saying, stop, take a look. And so I think that's a very valuable thing for artists to think about as well, obviously. And so that's and I think about what the writer Andre Asiman has written an essay lately, which you can all Google. But he poses the question, who will we be next time this year? Who will we be this time next year? So that has a lot to do with how we're thinking in this moment. And anyway, yes, so.
Abby, did you want to add to that? Did you want to do a response?
I was just thinking about the climate change conversation. I think is a really interesting one. To all of Nicky's points, I mean, the sky has never been bluer here in Los Angeles. I can tell you, it is absolutely gorgeous outside. Not that we are getting out enough to experience it, but I do think there is a bit of a reset button, as Nicky is saying. And I remember reading an article probably back in January in the New York Times about a choreographer who is refusing to travel because of carbon emissions and is finding new ways to imprint his choreography in new locations that don't involve him actually having to travel there to teach it. And a lot of this discussion has hearkened up the themes of that article, is like, how do we start to use these tools and to actually create systems that might actually be beneficial to how we make work internationally, across continents, across time and space, that resonates after we are all allowed back to some version of life as normal. So those things are kind of sitting around with me in terms of how we make work. The other thing that's kind of gestating with me with what Billy was talking about, as a producer, I'm always primarily concerned with like audience, right? Like, will they find me? Will they find the artists I'm producing? how will they find me? Will they like it? What is their experience? One of my favorite things to do as a producer is to sit in the back of a house and watch my audience watch the show. It's like the most enjoyable experience. My husband is an artist and he hates sitting in the back of the house because he hates watching the audience watch the show. He would rather sit in the front row and be there with the actors. I want to be in the back and watch the whole experience. And so my question to Billy, really, because you have the most experience in this new platforms, is like, what is the audience, and like, what is the audience experience of this streaming format? I mean, watching Netflix is a very passive experience, right? Even watching this panel, although people do get to engage with us via chat on Facebook, is a very passive experience versus sitting in a theater, which is a very engaged and multi-directional experience. And so, like, when I think about how we continue in this format, is my question to the rest of you is really like, what is the audience? Who is the audience? Are they there? And then what do they want and need from this platform that we can provide for them as theater artists or dancers or choreographers? And
Any responses? We have about 15 to 20 minutes going forward if anybody would like to respond.
Well, I mean, I would just respond in saying that I think we're just on the cusp of actually the technology being ready to allow for some of these ideas to come forward. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is, yeah, like audience, like a performer feedback system, right? You know, so if you're a performer, you get applause, you obviously get the palpable energy in the room, you get laughter, you get coughs, you get those types of things. And are there ways that you could mediate those? And so I think a really good example that we're all familiar with is like on the Facebook live stream, you know, you can make that flow of emojis, right? Well, that's one sort of artistic expression of what can be done with that data, but you know, there's an infinite number of other expressions that could be put, you know, because it really is just a transference of data, right, from the end user. And there's a whole architecture that's there. And of course, these are complex systems. And that means that we need to, we're moving away from a time of the singular artist, you know, that painter with his brush, you know, and that kind of, you know, very forward direction, singular perspective on art making. And that's why I think theater is one of the best places to actually examine this situation, because theater has always is inherently just a highly collaborative, multidisciplinary approach. And if we can bring technologists and new media and also look at them through the content, not only through the form, but through the content critically, through a critical lens, I think that we need to do that, because the technology is not going away. It's ever more present, right? And we as artists need to actually create technologies and inform the technologies that need to be created that can amplify our humanity, I believe.
I'd like to add something from the comments I think sort of goes with this from Jared. Abby, you were earlier talking about like who comes to the shows and who doesn't come to the shows. He's saying, what does this say about creating community online? We have to come to terms with the variety of audiences, he says, that we might have never encountered before. And with planning, is this not actually an opportunity to reach different people and open doors? For instance, I have had some success in creating more engaged and less passive audience experiences through platforms like Discord. Anyone want to comment on that? Like the people who can now have access to these performances who might not be able to, they might have barriers of seeing some of these shows, whether geographical or economic, or maybe they feel that the theater is not a place that has ever been accepting of someone like them. If you,
I mean, that's a very real problem of the theater, you know, and I think that disseminating the work in a way, in a different a different arena, and one that is really like pretty democratic, and in terms of like who can engage with it, definitely opens the door to a wider audience engagement. I still like I'm hoping that I guess my hope is there's a feeding back in, because it's interesting, the question about like over or romanticizing the live experience. It raises a question for me about like what that means, like the intent, like what the person asking that question thinks of as romanticized. Because I think on the one hand, yes, you can like aggrandize something and make it sound like it's the most important thing in the world. And on the other hand, I feel that these experiences, to me, I mean, it's like, when so many people right now in the face of what's going on, it's like, how can I do something that matters, that can really help? And I think a lot of artists are like, is what I do important right now? And I don't want to, over emphasize the importance of making art, and yet I also don't want to say that it has no value in the world. In this world, during tragedy, during like large problems. I think it's a very important part of how we live our lives and communicate with each other. And if we can take it out of a sense of exclusivity, that makes it even more valuable to people.
Just to even further deepen the conversation, I love everything that's being said. Abner Delina Jr. says, how do we as humans tackle or understand trust and safe spaces during this time while we develop new languages and processes of contact and creation separated by our screens at home? Assuming that the crisis will end sooner, how do we prepare our communities to trust each other again after this? To gather together, to listen to each other, to touch, to embrace each other, to explore intimacy during COVID and after COVID. If anyone would like to comment on that. Also, this idea of finding opportunities beyond, Tereke Ortiz in Mexico says, with this media, there's opportunities of finding common interests beyond geographical, local closeness. And he's thinking of global universal health, universal free transit as examples. If anyone would like to comment on like these concepts within the possibilities of this technology. I mean, still moving forward, someone, Yvonne?
Those are amazing questions, but I feel like there is so much to unpack there that this could be like a whole separate panel. But I would like to jump in quickly and zoom out a little bit and sort of piggyback on what Nicky and Abby mentioned earlier, just because I feel like, we have been talking about what our own reactions have been to the crisis that we are traversing right now. And I feel like there's kind of like this a congregation of thoughts that have been inviting themselves over and over during this time of pause, which is just something having to do with how truly unsustainable I feel like our field has become. I think we are operating in a system where we are expecting to be like hamsters on a wheel, and just in case anybody thinks that I'm pointing fingers, I'm pointing the finger at myself as well. I think, there is, I feel like with each year that passes, an incredible pressure on the artists and producing organizations to do more, and to report an uptick in the audiences, more people served, more programs, more education, more engagement, and at the same time the funding is flat, if not less than before. And while I hate to sort of, dumb it down to sort of like no money, no music argument, I also feel like we need to do some really serious work in terms of recognizing the importance of artists being paid and how much we are expected to produce. I feel like that perhaps, this is the sort of like this unexpected gift, it's probably not the right word, that we can accept during this really tragic and unprecedented time, which is to really say, let's take the opportunity to pause and reflect, which is something, again, speaking for myself, that never happens. It just never happens. So maybe this is the time to pause and reflect and think about how not to go back to normal that we are used to, but to imagine, what is a kind of a more humane and sustainable new normal that we can hopefully transition to after we are on the other side of this.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, Yvonne, because last week we talked to Nadia and Sean, who are running a freelance artist
amazing
relief fund. Yeah, they're doing incredible work, and they spoke about how, artists are not just artists, but they are servers, they are craftsmen, they are sex workers, they have these variety of different identities that the infrastructure of the arts world has sort of required them to be. This will sort of be final thoughts, but would anyone like to sort of comment about how we move forward, reconsidering the way that things are set up?
I just wanted to quickly agree and concur with Yvonne before we lose that thought. Yes, maybe we won't ever go back to normal as we knew it. I don't think so. Actually, I hope not. And maybe there is a new way we will be looking at each other, which is actually humane. We could call it humane. And I really, in my most private moments at home, I want to see that light at the end of this tunnel. Sorry to use this metaphor, but yes, that we can be a better human race, actually. I want to put that out there. Thank you.
I could not agree more.
Wonderful. I think that's actually a really great note to end on. I would like to thank everyone on the panel for participating: Noel, Billy, Abby, Nicky, Yvonne, everyone on the technical side of things that assisted with this. Also, LaMama would like to thank all of our funders who allow this content to continue to be made. You can find a list of our funders on the websites under upcoming live streams. And we appreciate everyone who has donated to allow this to keep going. This video will be available in the future, both on LaMama's website at lamama.org and on LaMama's Facebook and everywhere that it's shared. So please share. We'll be back next week at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another conversation. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. we have a kids performance that you can also watch live on Facebook and on our website at lamama.org. And then on Friday, it's another performance of Downtown Variety, and we have an incredible lineup of performers. And again, all of this is completely free, and we appreciate anyone who can donate that does donate. Thank you again to the panelists, and I hope everyone's staying happy and healthy and safe out there. Thank you so much.